Tonight we slip quietly through time into the beating heart of ancient Nubia. The air is thick with incense and heat, and queens glide across sandstone floors, their sandals whispering against polished stone like silk across skin. You crouch in the shade of a column, watching gold-strapped feet leave soft prints in the dust, prints that say, "I rule this place," even barefoot. You're about to wander into the world of Nubian royalty, where sandals weren't just shoes, they were statements. But you probably won't survive this era, not unless you're a queen, a crocodile, or a really persuasive sandal. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love hearing where in the world you're unwinding. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice, besides the sheer number of servants fluttering around like nervous butterflies, is the way sand clings to everything. It grits between your teeth, it scrapes behind your knees, but mostly, it coats the feet of every single royal figure in sight. Including hers. The Queen. She walks slowly, deliberately. Not because she's unsure, but because she knows the effect. Every step is a soundless proclamation. The sandal she's wearing, it's not just a shoe, it's a golden invitation to look, to bow, to whisper, who made those? They glint in the morning sun, narrow leather soles dyed a soft red-brown, rimmed with gold leaf and a lattice of palm fibers. There's a thin strap up the arch of her foot, another coiled around her ankle like a tiny serpent. You swear the clasp is shaped like a lion's fang. And now she's past you. Gone. Her scent, sandalwood and warm acacia, lingers like a dream you'll try and fail to describe tomorrow. You're in Napata, maybe 700 BCE or so, under the reign of one of the Kandake queens. They're not pharaohs, no, that's Egypt's word. Here, they're warriors, priestesses, rulers of empires and family feuds. They command armies and insult gods without blinking. And yes, they choose their own sandals. It's easy to imagine ancient royalty stomping around in solid gold flip-flops, but that's a Hollywood trick. Gold was everywhere, sure, but too soft to survive a day in the desert. Real sandals. They started from earth, woven reeds, animal hides, tough leather so sunbaked it could double as armor. But the queens? Oh, they took it further. Each pair was tailored not just to the foot, but to the moment. A diplomatic audience with a rival prince. Choose the ones with carnelian beads, bold, but not hostile. A temple right under the full moon. Out come the sandals with silver thread tassels that whisper as you walk. Going to battle? Yes, there are sandals for that too, reinforced soles, iron studs, and a red dye made from crushed insects that makes your footprints look like blood. Historians still argue whether Nubian sandals were primarily symbolic or fully functional. The truth depends on the queen and the day. You know how it is. Some days you want to slay in 6-inch heels, others, you want your fluffiest socks and a hug from your cat. One mainstream fact, Nubia's wealth in gold, ivory, and exotic leather meant their royal sandals were often leagues ahead of Egypt's in both material and craftsmanship. Even some Egyptian princesses, scandal alert, imported Nubian sandal styles under cover of night, hiding them under temple robes. You trail behind the queen now, through a carved stone hallway lined with lotus motifs and lion statues. The floor is cool. The walls echo with distant music, a kind of bronze harp lullaby. She steps through a beaded curtain, disappears again. You're not following this time. You're standing there, mesmerized, staring down at a single print in the dust. It's small, narrow, arching slightly left like a dancer's pose. Around the heel, an impression of knotted twine. Near the toe, a faint stamp, a scarab, maybe, or a snake. Hard to tell. What matters is that it's intentional. That little touch isn't just flair. It's a symbol. A ward. A flex. A secret. You blink and imagine walking in those sandals. Would they fit? Probably not. But that's not the point. You'd walk taller. Slower. You'd feel the way your foot met the earth and how it pushed back, just a little. You'd feel taller than the statues. You'd feel watched. A fringe theory, whispered, never written, suggests that Nubian queens chose their sandals not just for ceremony, but for sound. That's right, how they sounded walking mattered. The clink of beads, the swish of leather, the hush of silk tassels against stone. It was like a language. Step, step, pause. The nobles lean in. The servants freeze. The queen is coming, and you can hear her glory. And yet, some queens, it's said, preferred silence. The sandals of Queen Amanishakheto, supposedly built with soft inlays of palm wool, so quiet they could sneak through enemy temples undetected. Or just surprise their concubines. As you sit there, legs stretched, eyelids a little heavy, you wonder what your own royal sandals would look like. Would you go for opulence? Function? Weird toe rings shaped like crocodiles? Or just one perfect strap that says, "Don't mess with me"? Above, the sky slowly dims from gold to plum. The sandstone glows like fire one last time before sleep. And down the corridor, you hear it, the softest scuff. A rhythm. A message. Maybe a warning. Maybe an invitation. And still, those sandals glint in your mind. Silent, sacred, sovereign. You're still thinking about those sandals. The way they shimmered under dust and light. The way they seemed to hum with intention, like they had their own agenda. But before a queen steps into a pair worthy of legends, someone has to make them. And that someone? They're called leather whisperers. You trudge through the outer quarters of the royal compound, past courtyards busy with tradesmen and servants. The air is thicker here, less perfume, more animal. There's a scent of oil, hide, something faintly sour, and definitely alive. You pass racks of drying skins, long strips of leather stretching like prehistoric laundry. You wrinkle your nose. It's not glamorous, but oh, it's essential. The sandals may rule the runway, or whatever the ancient equivalent is, but here in the tannery, it all starts in the muck. You duck under a low thatched roof and find them, the artisans. They don't look up when you arrive. Their hands are too deep in work. A young woman slices cured hide with a bronze blade, muscles flexing in the heat. A man so old he looks fossilized is threading tiny reeds through a sole, his fingers so fast they blur. Another hums to herself as she rubs something thick and green, probably fig sap, into the surface of a nearly finished sandal. Their movements are rhythmic, like prayer. Their eyes, sharp as obsidian. Historians often credit Egyptian cobblers with sandal mastery, but Nubia had its own elite craft schools long before that narrative stuck. These artisans weren't just tradespeople, they were respected. Sometimes feared. Some even tattooed their clan symbols onto their wrists or eyelids, in case their sandals were ever forged. It's a quiet flex. You don't copy perfection and get away with it. You lean in, watching the leather whisperers work. One of them notices you and raises an eyebrow. You nod, trying to look like you belong. The woman nearest you grins and tosses you a roll of softened hide. It lands with a slap in your arms. Heavy. Warm. Probably from a water buffalo or, if the queen's feeling indulgent, hippopotamus. Supposedly tougher, more durable, and yes, more spiritual. Fringe belief alert. Some Nubian artisans swore by hippopotamus hide for queens because the animal symbolized divine ferocity. In some border regions, sandal soles were inscribed with tiny protective prayers and then layered into the leather, hidden beneath the foot, between the skin and the earth. You wouldn't see them, but the idea was that the queen walked with a blessing pressed into every step. You glance around the workshop. There are racks of tools hanging neatly from pegs, bronze punches, bone picks, small hammers worn smooth. No two sandals are made the same way. Some are stitched with sinew, others woven entirely from reeds and dyed fibers. One sandal in progress has beads inlaid along the straps in a wave pattern, each one no bigger than a lentil. Pattern for mourning, the old cobbler mutters without looking up. Walks like sorrow. You pause. How does sorrow walk? Slowly, quietly, with a limp? Or does it storm barefoot through the palace, howling with painted eyes? There's a debate among scholars about whether specific patterns and materials were reserved for particular life events. Was there a sandal for grief? For childbirth? For vengeance? The evidence is scattered, and often more poetic than literal, but the artisans here, they know. They remember. You follow the cobbler to a different table, this one less dusty, with scrolls of palm bark laid out across the surface. Instead of tools, this space is covered in dyes, red from madder root, yellow from saffron, deep purple from crushed berries, black from soot and oil. He dips a thin reed brush into something the color of rust and begins sketching on leather. Curves, lines, spirals, no measuring tools, just memory. That, he explains, will become the tongue of the sandal, the part that bridges the foot. It'll be shaped to fit exactly under the Queen's arch, balancing aesthetics and pressure points. You didn't think royalty had orthopedic needs, did you? Modern scientists examining recovered sandals from Nubian tombs found surprising ergonomic features: elevated heels, shaped arches, flexible bindings. They weren't just pretty, they were engineered. Luxury with foot support. Eat your heart out, Louboutin. The hum of the workshop continues as the sun passes its peak. Sweat beads on the artisan's brows. One woman pulls a strip of leather taut between her knees and threads tiny cowrie shells into it. Not for fashion, she says, but fertility. It's an old belief: step on shells, bear strong children. Laugh all you want, but the queens didn't. They ordered cowrie-studded sandals by the dozen. You're offered a sip of something from a cracked ceramic cup. It tastes like date wine and bad decisions. You nod politely and feel it warm your throat. Then the mood shifts. A new pair of sandals has arrived, one that needs fixing. The artisans crowd around as the old cobbler lifts it from a wooden case. It's blackened around the edges, stiff, and there's something odd about the leather. It's smooth, too smooth, like it's been lacquered. The whispers start immediately. Desert burned. No, that's ritual oil. Too flat. This isn't hers. Wrong stitching. Apparently, this sandal was returned from a palace courier. It's supposed to be Queen Amanishaketo's, but this isn't her taste. Too flashy. Too Egyptian. Suspicion curls like smoke through the room. Is this a forgery? A prank? A test? The oldest leather whisperer picks it up, turns it slowly in the light, then drops it back onto the table with a clatter. Trash, he says. Everyone nods. You nod, too. Because clearly, you're part of the team now. Some scholars believe there was a kind of guild oversight in these workshops, a quiet hierarchy to ensure quality and loyalty. After all, sandals were an extension of a queen's power. Letting the wrong hands, or spies, near the designs, that could collapse dynasties. Or at least cause an embarrassing fashion moment at the Moon Festival. As the sun sinks lower, a fresh breeze rustles the tent walls. The artisans start to clean. Sand is swept. Tools are wiped. Leathers are stacked. The day's work is over. You're handed a tiny strip of dyed leather. A souvenir. Or a warning. Or maybe both. As you step outside, blinking into the golden dusk, you feel something shift under your own foot. You look down. A leather scrap, shaped like a teardrop, lies in the sand behind you. You pick it up. It's warm. You're still turning that leather scrap over in your hand, wondering if it's just a discard or something else. Then you hear it, a wet squelch from beyond the main workshop. Curious, you follow a trail of heavy footprints toward a smaller tent that smells wrong. Thick, musky, with a hint of smoked resin and, weirdly enough, bananas. You hesitate at the threshold. This is not the place they show the nobles. Inside, it's dim and damp. A large basin sits in the center, filled with a greenish paste that bubbles slightly, like it's thinking about becoming sentient. Two apprentices stand nearby, one holding a long stirring stick, the other looking mildly terrified. You are now in what the leather whisperers jokingly, but only sort of, call the pit. This is where sandal waterproofing happens. And waterproofing, as it turns out, is where the weird starts. You edge closer, pretending you're totally comfortable near mysterious oozing vats. A woman in a dark red tunic appears from behind a curtain of reeds, her arms streaked with oils and powders. She grins, revealing 3 gold teeth, and gestures to the bubbling vat. Crocodile fat, she says simply, as if that explains everything. You blink. Yes, you heard that right. Apparently, in Nubian royal tradition, crocodile fat rendered carefully from freshly caught river beasts was considered the ultimate conditioning balm. Slathered onto the soles of royal sandals, it not only softened the leather but bound it to the waters, making each pair spiritually and practically resistant to both Nile floods and bad luck. The smell? A bonus? Or a side effect? It depends who you ask. Mainstream historians generally agree that Nubians used a blend of animal fats and plant oils in sandal preservation. But crocodile fat is mentioned only in a few obscure temple scrolls, and even then, with a big, suspicious wink. Is it fact? Is it lore? Well, you're standing next to a vat of it, so maybe it's both. A young apprentice waves a feather over the bubbling mixture, mumbling a prayer. For the goddess Tefnut, she whispers. She keeps the water pure. This isn't just chemistry. It's ritual. They start adding other ingredients. Frankincense. Crushed myrrh. A sprig of something that smells like mint but bites like fire when you lean in too close. One of them tosses in a sliver of obsidian, which clinks against the side of the vat like a punctuation mark. You're told each queen had her own sandal balm recipe, passed down through her footmaidens or artisans. Some included ground lotus petals for scent, others bits of sacred ash or powdered turquoise for strength. One fringe recipe, rumored to belong to Queen Amanishakheto, included powdered hyena tooth, supposedly to make her steps unpredictable in battle. Historians still argue whether that's poetic metaphor or actual magical science. Hard to say. Either way, hyenas are involved, and that's never casual. They dip a sandal sole into the mixture. The hide absorbs the paste slowly, darkening to a deep umber. It glistens wetly, then begins to steam faintly in the cool air. One of the women fans it with a strip of palm leaf. You're offered the chance to touch it, just the edge. It's warm, slick, and, weirdly, it hums. Not literally, of course. But you feel something in your fingers, a vibration almost, as if the leather remembers walking. Or plans to. Just as you're settling into this strange spa-like vibe, a new item is brought out, a sandal mold carved from sycamore wood. It's in the shape of a slender foot, slightly arched, with 2 slots for leather threading. The artisans say this one belonged to a queen who never walked, not in this life, anyway. It was her afterlife sandal. A funerary pair, soaked in this very paste, then buried with her beneath a temple mound near Jebel Barkal. Apparently, the sandals were designed not to endure time, but to transcend it. Durable enough to walk the road to the ancestors. Stylish enough to get compliments on the way. You catch yourself staring at the bubbling vat again. Maybe it's the steam, or the scent, or just the heat, but you start to feel floaty, dreamy. like your limbs are lighter and your thoughts slower. One apprentice hands you a cloth soaked in warm balm and suggests you wrap it around your wrist. You do. The heat seeps into your skin. It smells like the river after rain. Like secrets. Suddenly, a sharp noise slices through the tent, the clatter of a dropped ladle. Everyone freezes. You turn. An older artisan stands at the door, face pale, lips tight. She's holding a sandal. Not one of theirs. It's stiff, gleaming, and unmistakably Egyptian. Gasps ripple across the room like wind over reeds. The old woman steps forward, lays the sandal beside the vat. This was found near the Queen's pool, she says, her voice thin. It's not ours. Now the apprentices really look terrified. Espionage isn't just a military thing out here. Royal sandals could carry secrets, codes stitched into the thread, pigments that shift under moonlight. Some pairs were rumored to leave messages in the dust, visible only to certain eyes. And now, an outsider's sandal has appeared in the heart of the palace's craft sanctum. You ask, what happens now? The oldest artisan shrugs. We burn it. Of course they do. There's a brazier nearby, already glowing. The Egyptian sandal is fed to the flames. It curls and hisses and shrinks like paper in a windstorm. The smell is sharp, bitter, and not at all majestic. It smells like betrayal. One apprentice mutters something under her breath. You only catch the end, won't fool her feet. You wonder how often queens had to deal with this. With spies and forgeries, with sandals that looked right but felt wrong. Maybe that's why the crocodile fat. Maybe that's why the incense and prayers. Not just for the sandal, but for the soul of the person who wore it. You're led out of the tent as smoke spirals behind you. Outside, the sky is a darkening sapphire, and the air smells cleaner, like something bad has been exhaled. You glance down at your own feet. Bare. Dusty. Honest. And for a moment, you think maybe that's enough. You're still barefoot. And while that seemed poetic a moment ago, now it just feels gritty. Nubian dust has a way of sneaking into places you didn't know had crevices. You consider asking for sandals of your own, but then, just in time, your escort reappears and waves you forward. There's more to see. You're led through a shaded corridor of palm fronds woven into archways. The air cools slightly, scented with river wind and just a trace of charred wood. As you pass under the final arch, your breath catches. Laid out before you is what can only be called a sandal vault. Row upon row of shelves stretch down a stone corridor, each shelf lined with sandals, dozens, maybe hundreds. Some pristine, some cracked with age. Gold, reed, leather, beads, feathers, even delicate shells strung into arching curves. This isn't storage. It's memory. Your guide, a younger artisan now carrying a bronze stylus, turns to you and says, "These are the archived steps." You nod like that makes perfect sense. Because of course it does. She begins leading you through the vault. Each section represents a different queen, a different reign, and, judging by the insane variety of styles, a wildly different mood board. Historians often lump Nubian royalty into generic categories: warrior queens, priestess rulers, regents. But here, in the sandals, the distinctions come alive. Queen Amanishaketo's collection? Bold. Geometric. Thick-soled with inlaid lapis and vertical leather towers that look almost gladiatorial. Queen Amanishaketo's? Delicate reedwork, embroidered with blue thread so fine it vanishes at a distance. Queen Amanishaketo's? All leather, all business, and 2 pairs with iron studs. For grip. Or intimidation. You're told sandals were archived like scrolls, categorized by reign, occasion, and spiritual significance. Some had their own names. One pair, resting in a silk-lined box, is simply labeled Stormsinger. Another, older and flaking at the edges, is tagged with a Nubian phrase that roughly translates to the one who refused. That one? Yeah, we'll come back to her later. The artisan pauses at a glass panel showing a cross-section of a ceremonial sandal, layers of material carefully stacked like pastry. This one, she says, tapping the top strap, belonged to a queen who only wore it once. Just before declaring war. And this isn't metaphor. It's documented. A single public appearance, with sandals specially constructed to squeak as she walked. Not loudly, but audibly enough that every step echoed in the throne hall. Deliberate noise. Intimidation by sound. The war that followed? Brutal. But her sandals survived. Guess who won? Fringe belief. Some Nubians thought queens could speak through their footsteps. That the right sole shape could channel spirits of the river, or ancestors. A click of heel, a scuff of reed, a certain rhythm. That wasn't walking. That was incantation. You walk further in, deeper into the archive. Your guide stops at a high shelf and reaches up for a sandal that gleams dull gold under dust. It's small. Narrow. Probably for a younger queen, or maybe even a ceremonial step-in ritual before coronation. It's strung with fine silver chain, delicate enough to snap if you so much as sneezed near it. This pair, she says, was worn during a storm blessing. You blink. A what now? Turns out, during particularly dry seasons, the palace would hold a ritual calling for rain. And yes, queens had designated storm sandals. Designed to channel the blessing upward, with soles etched in spirals meant to catch the wind. You suppress a laugh. Or try to. But really, shoes that summon rain? Sure, why not? Beats modern weather apps. Scholars are split on whether storm sandals actually existed or if this is more myth than method. Some temple illustrations depict queens in open-toe footwear beneath swirling clouds, but there's no explicit mention of shoes with meteorological powers. Still, the symbolism's hard to miss. And the sandals? Real enough to hold. You move deeper into the archive. Here, things get older. Rougher. The early dynasty shoes. Straps made of papyrus twine. Soles carved from acacia bark. One sandal has what looks like bite marks on the side, maybe crocodile. Or maybe someone just had a bad day. This section isn't as curated. The lighting is dimmer. Dust heavier. You get the feeling that only a few people even come back here. Your guide lowers her voice as if the sandals can hear her. These, she says, are from the time before names. Chills. You pretend it's just the airflow. You pause before a pair that's barely holding together, frayed at the toe, stitched in a strange diamond pattern. No tag. No name. Just the quiet aura of something that's seen too much. According to some fringe theories, early Nubian queens weren't always crowned by bloodline. Some were chosen through dreams. Through omens. One story tells of a young woman whose sandals turned white overnight. No dye. No tampering. Just changed. And the next day, the high priest declared her queen. Historians still argue whether that's a metaphor for divine favor or just a weird leather reaction to morning dew. Either way, she ruled for 19 years and expanded the territory by half. Good sandals, apparently. You linger in the archive. The shelves stretch on, quiet and reverent. It's not just a museum. It's a mausoleum of steps. Each sandal represents a decision, a risk, a moment. And suddenly, you realize you've been walking barefoot through it all. Dust clings to your soles, sure, but something else does too. A thread of connection. As if, somehow, your skin has joined the story. Your guide leads you toward a stone doorway draped in linen. You duck through and emerge into a room filled with light. Sunlight filters through narrow windows, catching on something breathtaking. Mirrors. Not glass, those weren't common yet, but polished metal. Dozens of panels reflecting the sandals displayed below. And these are the chosen ones. The most sacred pairs. You've made it to the royal selection room. You pause for a beat, just long enough for your breath to catch in your throat. Then you take a step forward into the sunlight-soaked room. You squint slightly, not from brightness but from disbelief. Every surface gleams. The sandals here aren't tucked away in dusty alcoves or lined up on utilitarian shelves. No. These are on carved stone pedestals, one pair per plinth, like mini thrones. And they absolutely deserve it. Each pair is a masterpiece. More sculpture than footwear. Some shine with beaten gold, their soles so smooth you wonder how anyone stayed upright in them. Others are studded with cowrie shells arranged in precise patterns, symbols of fertility, wealth, and femininity. A few pairs shimmer with colored glass, tiny chips fused into leather like ancient rhinestones. You blink again. Is that mica dust? Of course it is. Because why not be fabulous and gritty? Your guide says softly, these were the finalists. Finalists? Yes. Apparently, when a new queen was crowned, or when a reigning queen wanted a new public image, she would commission a fresh round of sandal designs. Dozens of artisans would submit their concepts. Only the top 10 were chosen for the selection room. From these, the queen would pick the pair or pairs she'd wear for ceremonies, parades, judgments, even war. It's the Nubian version of a royal fashion week. You approach a sandal with wing-shaped straps and turquoise inlays that form a rising sun across the top of the foot. The platform is subtly sloped, giving the wearer a small but commanding lift. Designed for Queen Amanishakheto, your guide says, with clear reverence. She wore it during the Festival of Thresholds. You ask what that is, and the guide smiles. When seasons changed, she'd cross from dry land into the Nile's edge, symbolizing her balance between world and water. This pair was water-walked. Which sounds romantic until she explains that the sandals were stitched with swamp vine fibers, chosen for their ability to float, for a few seconds, anyway. It's said that the queen once stood on the river's surface just long enough for the sun to catch her golden soles. A miracle? A trick? Historians still argue whether she actually walked on water or just very convincing shallows. But hey, iconic either way. You move to the next plinth. This one holds a pair so minimal it feels modern. Thin, supple leather-dyed charcoal black, with only 2 straps, one across the toes, one around the ankle. But then you notice something odd. The bottom is slightly weighted. When lifted, it tilts, then rights itself. Balanced. Always. This, your guide says, was chosen by Queen Amanishakheto after she lost her eye in battle. You go still. You've heard of her, of course. Warrior. Diplomat. General. She fought Rome to a standstill, famously negotiated peace, and ruled afterward with a steel spine and a golden smile. These sandals, they became her symbol. They're called the equalizers, your guide continues. Designed to keep her centered. You're told the queen asked that her gait remain smooth and symmetrical. She didn't want anyone reading weakness in her steps. So her sandals were engineered to redistribute weight with each movement. Tiny weights, hidden in the sole, helped compensate for her wound. Every step, defiant perfection. You're pretty sure your jaw is hanging open now. Not very regal of you, but understandable. As you move through the room, the stories pile up like silk. A pair of sandals shaped like lotus petals, made for a queen's coronation beneath a sky of eclipsing suns. A sky heel, one might say. Another pair woven with thin strips of bronze that made a faint chiming sound when the wearer walked, used during lunar rituals so her footsteps would match the rhythm of ceremonial drums. Talk about walking in sync. But it's not all pageantry and ritual. You stop at a plinth where the sandals are, unfinished. One strap is frayed. A heel is missing. A tag, in delicate brush script, reads only, withdrawn before selection. You frown. Why keep this one? Your guide glances around, then leans in. Because she changed her mind. You raise an eyebrow. She was expected to choose a public sandal, something tall, ornate. But she came here alone, late at night, and told the steward she was choosing something else entirely. Something simpler. She said, "I am done with being lifted. Let me walk as I am." You stare at the incomplete sandal. You mean she ruled barefoot? Not quite. Your guide smiles. But close. There's power in that, isn't there? Choosing not to impress, but to be understood. Not to tower, but to tread lightly. You glance around the room again. Every pair tells a story, not just of style or ceremony, but of selfhood. Identity. A queen's sandals were more than her foundation, they were her message. And speaking of messages, your guide turns and gestures toward a set of narrow stairs hidden behind a curtain. You follow. At the top, you're greeted by a cool stone chamber lined with what look like maps, but not of lands or rivers. These are footprint charts. Hundreds of them. Each one unique. You're told they are royal impressions, pressed into clay during selection ceremonies, later fired into tiles. They show arches, toe spacing, heel depth. But also, symbolism. A narrow gap between big toe and second, seen as a sign of quick judgment. High arches, blessed by the wind spirits. Flat-footed queens, rare, but considered closer to earth, more grounded. Apparently, when a queen stood to choose her sandal, she also made her mark. Literally. Her footprint was recorded for the ages. In times of drought or war, priests would sometimes consult those impressions, searching for clues. Where did she lean? Which foot bore the weight? You look closer at one tile, tiny, neat, almost dainty. But beneath the toes is a slash, carved deliberately into the clay. It's a ritual mark, your guide explains. Meant to indicate pain endured. This queen had no visible limp, but her sandals were always soft-soled. Always quiet. You think of how many stories a step can hold. How many secrets a soul can speak. And you realize, Nubian queens didn't just walk through history. They chose how they entered every room. You descend the stone steps slowly, your mind still swirling with footprint charts and floating queens and chime sandal rhythms. Each revelation feels like it adds another layer under your feet. Like you're stacking invisible souls of history and meaning with every step. Your guide doesn't say much as you return to the main corridor, but then, she doesn't have to. You've entered a different part of the palace now. And this place has its own language. You're in the weaving quarters. It smells of flax and dye and something faintly nutty, shea oil, maybe. The air here is warmer, but not in a harsh way. It's the kind of warmth that comes from steady hands and long hours. Women, mostly older, sit cross-legged at low tables, looping leather strips into intricate knots, their fingers moving like dancers. No one looks up when you enter. Not because you're unwelcome, but because they're too deep in the rhythm to be disturbed. This is where the sandals are born. Not in a royal vault. Not under polished mirrors. But here, among dyed reeds and beeswax pots and softly sung lullabies. You're waved toward a workbench where a sandal is mid-assembly. The sole is thick papyrus braided with river reed, and the strap frame is marked with chalk lines for precise cuts. It's strangely meditative to watch. You almost forget to ask what this one's for. A coronation, the nearest weaver says, not looking up. Her voice is rough, like it's been filtered through a dozen campfires. But not for a queen. You blink. A prince's mother, she clarifies. He's too young to rule, so she'll reign until he's ready. Ah. So a queen by guardianship. Still a big deal. Still needs a proper pair. This leads your guide into a soft monologue about Regency sandals, a category all their own. Not quite full queenly grandeur, but not ordinary either. The challenge, she explains, lies in the messaging. You need a sandal that says temporary ruler but eternal presence. Subtle power. Grace with an edge. You glance back at the one in progress. It's reed-colored, but dusted with ochre along the edges. A sunshadow finish, they call it, meant to shimmer only in certain light. In other words, you don't show your hand all at once. Very on brand. Nearby, a second artisan is working on a fringe sandal, literally. Threads of blue leather dangle from each strap, like waterfall droplets caught mid-fall. You lean in. She notices your curiosity and says quietly, "These are for mourning." You pause. "Mourning sandals?" She nods. Queens wore them when grieving. Not just people, sometimes. Lands. Villages. Even trees. It's not performative, she adds. It's sacred. The strands are dyed from indigo plants that only grow after a fire. Renewal from loss. And yes, of course there's a rule, mourning sandals must never squeak. Too cheerful. There's even a known instance, this is your fringe fact for the night, of a queen halting a funeral procession because someone's sandals were too loud. She ordered the offender's shoes burned on the spot and replaced with silent soles carved from corkwood. Priorities. As you walk deeper into the weaving room, you notice something odd. There are no mirrors. None. Just polished bronze bowls for light reflection, and even those are mostly turned down. Why no mirrors, you ask? The answer comes slowly. Because here, your guide says, we shape what the queen feels, not what she sees. You stand in that sentence for a second. Let it settle. In Nubian culture, much like their Egyptian neighbors, outward appearance mattered, but it was never everything. How something made you feel, the weight of a strap, the sway of a fringe, the chill or warmth of a soul, had a deeper role. Choosing sandals wasn't about glamour. It was about readiness. Was she about to forgive a rival? Launch a siege? Deliver judgment? Her sandals had to support her, not just physically, but emotionally. That's why, in the corner of the weaving quarters, there's an area with no work tables at all. Just pillows. And silence. It's called the foot meditation niche. Queens were brought here to reflect before a sandal fitting. To sit with their bare feet touching the earth. Sometimes for hours. Sometimes all night. You notice the ground here is different, powdered sand and soft clay, arranged in concentric circles like ripples from a dropped stone. It's a space for grounding. Quite literally. One weaver tells you that queens who skipped the niche were said to lose their balance, politically, emotionally, sometimes literally. There's an old tale about a queen who tripped during her coronation because she refused to connect with the dust. Naturally, that became a parable. You can't rule a land you're afraid to touch. Historians still argue whether this niche was spiritual or just a fancy mudfoot spa. But either way, the queens respected it. And here's your mainstream fact. Nubian royalty believed sandals needed to be foot-taught. That is, they had to learn their owner's shape through proximity, even before wear. 4 days before a ceremony, sandals would be placed under the queen's sleeping mat. That way, the soles would absorb warmth, contour, energy. By the time she wore them, they already knew her. Creepy? A little. Cool? Definitely. Before you leave, you notice a tiny pair of sandals resting on a ledge. Child-sized. Unadorned. Who were those for, you ask? The weaver's smile fades. A daughter who never ruled. You nod, silently. No need to ask more. Because even not worn sandals carry stories. As you exit the weaving room, you realize something else. You haven't heard anyone raise their voice in hours. No shouting. No barking of orders. Just slow, patient work. Like each stitch was a prayer. The hallway you return to now is lined with murals, scenes of queens walking through storms, walking on water, walking alone. And somewhere in the center of every image, no matter how dramatic the scene, there are the sandals. You move quietly now, almost like you're afraid to scuff the memory of the weaving quarters off your soles. Every corridor feels sacred, and every chamber whispers its own secrets. The air changes again, cooler, sharper. You catch a scent that makes you stop. Not incense. Not leather. This is sharper, darker, like resin and crushed bark. You follow your nose to a doorway draped with ivory-hued linen. Behind it, a strange stillness. You've entered the sandal apothecary. Sounds odd, doesn't it? Like a boutique for tired feet. But no, this place is serious business. This is where sandal function was enhanced with scent, salve, and spell. Yes, spell. The room is low-ceilinged, packed with small shelves. You see rows of ceramic jars labeled in a looping script. Powdered myrrh. Crushed lotus root. Crocodile dung. Wait, again? You raise an eyebrow. Didn't we already cover that? Your guide grins. That was for sunscreen. This is for soul softness. Of course it is. Apparently, the apothecary worked closely with the royal sandal makers. Every new pair was sent here before its first wear. Why? Because queens didn't just wear sandals, they anointed them. You approach a shallow basin filled with honey-colored oil. A weaver-turned-apothecary dips a soft brush in it, then begins painting the inside of a sandal strap. You watch, entranced. The oil, she tells you, is a mix of shea butter, palm resin, and crushed herbs. It softens the leather and infuses it with a calming scent, clove and blue lotus. It also keeps the spirits out, she adds, as if that's just a casual bonus. You pause. Spirits? Oh yes. In Nubian belief, shoes, especially worn ones, could trap energy. And not always the nice kind. Sandals that walked through battlefields, funerals, or arguments were believed to soak up those vibes like emotional sponges. So, cleansing was critical. This is where your fringe tidbit walks in. A certain Kandake, after winning a grueling negotiation with a rogue province, reportedly buried her sandals in a salt pit for 3 days, claiming they were too angry to wear again. You stand there, imagining a royal priest gently exorcising a moody left sandal. History has range. The apothecary continues her work, brushing sandal after sandal with tiny, reverent strokes. You notice that some sandals are also engraved on the inside sole with barely visible symbols. One looks like a spiral. Another, a triangle with waves inside. These are foot glyphs, your guide whispers. Not decorative, directive. The glyphs were chosen by the queen, her priestess, or sometimes the lead healer. Their purpose? To channel the energy of each step. Some glyphs represented confidence, others clarity, fertility, forgiveness. Queens literally walked their intentions. And sometimes, their revenge. There's a wall scroll nearby with a glyph you're told was called the Hidden Thorn. It was carved inside the sandals of a queen preparing to confront her unfaithful consort. The glyph's meaning: your next steps may look graceful, but each one will sting. Ouch. Historians still argue whether glyphs held genuine power or simply acted as psychological anchors. Either way, they were treated with utter seriousness. No glyph was reused. No sandal was passed down. You wander further in and find a table covered in strips of rawhide, each dyed a different color. Your guide taps one, a deep plum tone, and explains that this shade was reserved for confession sandals. Queens wore them when they had to admit a mistake publicly or deliver bad news. There was a kind of protocol: don the plum soles, speak plainly, let the people witness your humility. It wasn't about theatrics. It was about transparency, visible even in footwear. Next to the strips are pouches filled with sandal stuffing, soft bark fibers mixed with petals. Yes, petals. Turns out, some queens packed their soles with dried hibiscus and chamomile to keep their feet cool and scented during long marches. Who says warfare can't have aromatherapy? And here's your mainstream fact to walk away with. Nubian sandal makers were among the first documented artisans to blend leatherwork with medicinal practice. Their workshops were often attached to healing quarters. Queens believed proper foot care was not luxury, it was political stability. A limping queen might be seen as unbalanced, unfit, or worse, cursed. Which brings us to the superstition shelf. You're told this section is not officially part of the apothecary's duties. But it's always here. Every queen had her thing. One believed only left-footed sandals should be anointed first. Another demanded a single camel hair be woven into every sole. One queen insisted her sandals be passed over smoke before each public appearance, frankincense if she sought favor, cedar if she expected defiance. And one, well, she kept a beetle shell sewn beneath the heel. To crush pettiness underfoot, she reportedly said. Icon. You peek at an open scroll titled Sandal Omens. It's filled with signs and interpretations. Strap breaks during fitting. Abort your next decision. Sole squeaks at dusk. Someone's lying to you. Heel lifts more than usual. You're being flattered, don't buy it. You shake your head, smiling. Superstition or strategy? It blurs. Before you leave, your guide points to a closed cabinet. Inside are never-worn sandals. Not rejects. Not damaged. Just waiting. These were made for queens who died before the fitting, she says softly. You take a long breath. Each pair is perfectly preserved. Some still bear faint scents of the oils they were anointed with. There's something heartbreakingly beautiful about that. A queen who never took her first step in a life she had prepared for. But her sandals remain silent tributes. One pair has a note tied to it. Let them walk the heavens before me. You step back. The room has grown quieter somehow. Or maybe it's you. Maybe the weight of all those steps, not taken, has landed in your own feet. But you're not standing still for long. Your guide beckons you through a narrow door in the back, where a flight of spiral stairs leads up farther than you expect. Because next, you're walking into the Queen's War Room. You spiral upward, each step creaking softly beneath you. The sandals on your own feet, well, imagined feet, suddenly feel heavier, as though they're carrying not just your weight, but expectation. The scent of incense fades, replaced by something sharper: iron, chalk, dried papyrus. You reach the top, and a heavy wooden door opens into a surprisingly spare chamber. No gold here. No velvet. This is the war room. And yes, queens had one. You're not in a battlefield tent or a makeshift council hut. You're in a stone-walled sanctuary with maps etched directly into the floor, game pieces scattered across a giant grid, and a raised platform at the far end where the queen would stand barefoot to make decisions that might end in celebration or funerals. You walk toward the map, careful not to step on what looks like a symbol of a burning chariot. Your guide notices. That's where she lost her nephew, she says quietly. He charged without her command. The war room wasn't about chaos. It was about control, and sandals played their part here too. When a queen entered this chamber, her sandals changed. Literally. You're introduced now to the battle pair, and no, that doesn't mean metal-plated boots or chainmail slippers. Nubian war sandals were discreet but deadly. Reinforced with hardened leather and capped with bronze at the heel, they were both a symbol of authority and a last resort weapon. You could hear her coming, your guide says. But only when she wanted you to. Because here's the twist: war sandals weren't always silent. Queens sometimes wore ones that clicked sharply on stone, especially during moments of confrontation. It's said that Queen Amanishakheto would circle her enemies during negotiations, letting her sandals echo like clockwork. Tick, 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 until they crumbled. And yes, this is your mainstream fact. Queen Amanishakheto, who fought off the Roman Empire, was known to wear reinforced sandals during diplomatic visits. She even had spikes embedded in the edges, small enough to hide under a hem, sharp enough to leave a mark if necessary. But sandals weren't just intimidation tools, they were messages. On one wall of the war room is a row of pegs, each bearing a different pair of sandals. The left ones are brightly dyed, clean, ceremonial. The right ones are darker, scuffed, lined with thick soles. War and peace. When a queen stood at the council podium, she chose a pair based on what she intended, not what she said. There's a record here, your fringe tidbit, of a queen giving a speech about unity while wearing the heaviest war pair she owned. That night, she seized 3 rebel cities without warning. The people had missed the signal. Her generals hadn't. Sometimes the feet tell the truth before the mouth does. You take a moment to kneel by the etched map. It's worn down in places where sandal soles repeatedly tread over certain regions, borders redrawn, recrossed, reclaimed. You feel a chill. Your guide points to a pair of sandals in a glass case. They look ordinary, dusty, modest even. These were worn during the siege of Gaza, she says. She stood for 17 hours without sitting. Gave orders. Held the line. You stare closer. The soles are almost transparent with wear. The leather darkened, split at the toes. A foot shape remains, pressed so deeply into the material that it looks almost fossilized. There's a silence between you now. A reverence. Why not wear something more protective? You ask softly. She believed pain kept her alert. Comes the answer. Another queen, a later one, took the opposite approach. She commissioned sandals padded with ostrich feathers to keep her from bruising during long campaigns. Historians still argue whether this was indulgence or tactical genius. After all, she won every campaign she marched in. It makes you wonder how much of a ruler's strength is in how they walk. Behind the platform is a hidden alcove, barely a nook, really. Inside it, a single pair of white sandals. Untouched. Wrapped in linen. These were her final pair, your guide whispers. Made the night before she died. She never wore them. You sit there with that. Imagine the sandals made for a future that never arrived. The weight of endings hidden in soft white leather. Some say these are the most sacred kind of all, the shoes of intent, not history. There's an inscription nearby. Even when I fall, I step forward. You don't need to be told which queen wrote that. You feel her in the walls. One last curiosity before you leave this room. Your guide pulls out a thin, folded sheet of papyrus and shows you a record of sandal protocols. Actual wartime strategy notes from a royal scribe. If sandals are water-soaked, delay march. Never let soldiers see the queen limp. Burn all discarded sandals after campaign, never reuse. Sandal size must remain consistent in portraits. Perception of shrinking equals sign of weakness. Yes, really. Even apparent foot size had political implications. You smirk a little. So, sandals were propaganda too? Your guide nods. Everything is, when you rule. As you leave the war room, you glance back at the platform. The map. The sandals aligned on the pegs like chess pieces. And for a moment, you don't see queens anymore. You see generals. Strategists. Architects of movement. Each step a command. Each sandal a signature. Outside, the sun is beginning to dip. Shadows stretch long across the palace floor. And your guide leads you now to the place where strategy turned into spectacle. The royal stage. The open court, where sandals were seen and judged. You step into the open air, where the heat softens into golden warmth and the stone beneath your feet sighs with the sun's final breath. This is not the battlefield or the war room anymore. This is performance, precision, poise. You've entered the public court, where sandals met the gaze of the people. There's a rhythm here, a silent expectation etched into the very layout. Rows of seated nobles under canvas shade, marble columns inlaid with lapis, a central walkway long enough for drama. This is where queens walked to be seen. You pause at the edge of a shallow reflecting pool that mirrors the pillars in perfect silence. Your guide gestures to a raised stone threshold, a single smooth slab that separates the outer walkway from the heart of the court. This, she says, is the queen's first step. Every queen had a ceremonial moment when she crossed it, whether for a coronation, a judgment, a treaty announcement, or just the annual blessing of the waters. And when she did, all eyes dropped to her sandals. That's where the real statement began. Imagine it. You're a farmer or a merchant, squinting up at a woman dressed in sun-blinding linen, her silhouette framed by columns and smoke from perfumed burners. And then, click. A sandal touches stone. You glimpse the color, the cut, the shine. And instantly, you know her mood, her intent, her message. Because queens, they didn't leave it to chance. Their public sandals were curated with surgical precision. Here's your mainstream fact. Ancient Nubian queens often coordinated the color and style of their sandals with lunar phases. A new moon meant muted colors, grays, whites, or unpolished leather. A full moon, you'd see gold, crimson, deep indigo, shades that shimmered even in starlight. And yes, even more fascinating, fringe tidbit incoming, a single queen once wore sandals made entirely of translucent fish scales. They caught the light like jewels. The event. Her marriage to a river priest, naturally. You're starting to get the pattern here. You follow the stone path to a line of engraved seating platforms. These were for the high priests, council members, foreign guests. On special occasions, queens would deliberately slow their walk as they passed, offering each person just enough time to study the sandals and interpret them. That's right. There were sandal interpreters. Not formally titled, of course, but you better believe every noble had their own little theory. Heels 2 fingers thick. She's declaring strength. Laces that wrap above the ankle. She's invoking tradition. No embroidery. Either she's grieving or hiding something. Wait, is that obsidian in the sole? The court wasn't just about politics. It was fashion diplomacy, step theatrics, soul-based psychology. One queen, facing accusations of favoritism, wore mismatched sandals to her next public appearance, one gold, one plain black. The message? Yes, I carry imbalance. But I walk forward anyway. Historians still argue whether that was bravery, sarcasm, or a thinly veiled power flex. Either way, the crowd went wild. You lean closer to a carving on the central court platform. It shows a queen mid-stride, her robe flowing behind her, and beneath her feet, sandal prints in stone. Literally engraved, as though the artist believed that even her walk needed eternal preservation. And that was the point, wasn't it? In a world without video, without instant replay, your walk was your message. And sandals were your caption. You glance around and spot a curious archway tucked near the outer wall. It leads you into a quieter area, still part of the court, but set apart by flowering trees and carved benches. This, your guide whispers, is where queens waited before their entrance. The threshold garden. Here, final touches were made. Robes adjusted. Sandals retightened. And sometimes, swapped at the last second. Yes, there are records of queens changing their sandals mid-procession. One even had 3 pairs prepared, choosing one based on how the wind moved the trees. It was theater, but also intuition. And sometimes, self-protection. Because here's the thing, public court was also dangerous. Imagine stepping out in a new pair of sandals, only to have a strap break in front of hundreds. That wasn't just awkward, it was symbolic. A broken strap could be interpreted as divine disapproval, political instability, or weakness. It could shift alliances, fuel gossip, cost lives. Which is why, as you learn now, most queens carried a backup pair hidden in the garden's foliage, tucked behind urns, laid flat beneath silk cloth. Silent sentinels, just in case. You reach down and touch the edge of a faded cushion beneath a low bench. This one, you ask. Your guide nods. That's where Queen Tiaz sat before delivering her drought decree. She almost didn't go through with it. What changed her mind? Your guide smiles. Her sandals. She said, if my feet can carry this weight, so can my words. And yes, they still exist. Preserved in a cooled chamber nearby, lightweight red leather with soft linen ties and a woven symbol of rain stitched under the toes. Her words didn't bring the rains, but they brought order. One final moment catches your attention. Etched into the base of a pillar, a row of tiny footprints, far too small to be adult. You raise a brow. Royal children, your guide explains. Allowed to walk beside the Queen during festivals. Their first public sandals were considered blessings to the future. And now it all clicks, why so much attention was paid to these humble objects. Sandals weren't just fashion or function. They were foresight. You stand in the golden hush of the courtyard, feeling how each step, each ceremonial glide, was designed, calculated, and absolutely felt by those who watched. A queen's words mattered, yes. Her gaze too. But her sandals? They were the first thing the people saw, and the last thing they forgot. And as dusk settles over the reflecting pool, your guide gestures silently. You're not done yet. Because next, you step into the afterlife wardrobe, where sandals were chosen not for walking the earth, but for walking beyond it. The air cools noticeably as you step into the afterlife wardrobe. Not metaphorically, literally. The temperature drops, the scent shifts from sun-baked stone to something drier, dustier. Papyrus and cedarwood. A faint trace of something sweet, maybe myrrh. This chamber is low and long, with walls lined in clay niches and shelves of woven reed boxes. No lavish gold, no flashing jewels. Just rows upon rows of sandals. Pairs bundled in linen. Soles stacked like playing cards. Every pair here, never worn in life. These, your guide says, were for the next journey. You walk slowly now. Reverently. The hush feels holy somehow, even if you're not the spiritual type. You pass a pair of bone-white sandals so delicate they look like pressed petals. Nearby, something sturdier, wooden soles with mother-of-pearl studs, shaped to mimic stars. Each of these was meant to walk not through mud or market streets, but through eternity. Here's your mainstream fact. Nubian royal burials, especially for queens, often included up to 7 pairs of sandals, each symbolic. One for crossing the Nile, one for walking through judgment halls, one for the field of reeds, basically the ancient version of paradise, and more. And you guessed it, each pair told a story. You come to a small alcove set deeper into the wall. There's only one item here, a single sandal, wrapped in translucent linen. Not a pair, just one. Was the other lost? You ask, already guessing the answer. Your guide shakes her head. No. This queen was buried with only one sandal. That's the fringe tidbit you were waiting for. It belonged to Queen Sekhetma, who decreed in her final days that she would face the afterlife with only her left foot covered. So the gods know, she said, that I never arrived fully formed, that I was always unfinished. Some say it was humility. Others call it a veiled protest against her advisors who tried to rewrite her legacy in her final years. Historians still argue whether it was political symbolism, spiritual realism, or the final act of a woman tired of expectation. You bend close to it. The stitching along the sole spells out, "I step forward, even if the world does not follow." OOF. You walk farther, pausing at a row of sandals arranged by material: crocodile hide, dyed palm fibers, moonlight-dappled linen. Your guide taps the last one. These are the lightest sandals ever made. So soft they could tear just from air. But why make something so fragile, you ask? Because, she replies, some believed that in the afterlife, the lighter your step, the faster you'd rise to the stars. There it is again, that belief that how you walk matters, even beyond death. You round the corner to a dimmer chamber. Here, pairs of sandals are suspended inside glass, preserved like butterflies. And on the wall, a mural showing a queen walking toward a towering archway of flame, her sandals glowing beneath her. Winged figures watch from either side. That, says your guide, is the gate of becoming. In Nubian mythology, it's said that souls don't just arrive in the afterlife, they walk into themselves. Shed old identities. Embrace their most radiant truth. The sandals they wear. They burn away during the passage, leaving the soul barefoot, but elevated. Here's something poetic. Many queens requested that their burial sandals be flammable. Some pairs were soaked in sacred oils or wrapped in papyrus scrolls with prayers. The idea was that when the time came, the sandals would ignite, trailing light behind them. You stop in front of a display showing two such sandals mid-burn, caught in time by ancient preservation magic, or at least, some very skilled chemical desiccation. One charred edge curls like a smile. The other is etched with a single word, rise. There's another side to this, though. A darker one. Toward the far end of the chamber is a closed door. Your guide hesitates, then pushes it open. Inside is a single dais with no lights, only shadow. And in that shadow, sandals made of stone. Heavy, immovable. Bound with bronze wire. Ankles locked in place. These were not for queens, your guide murmurs. They were for royal prisoners. You freeze. Buried alive? You think. But no, not exactly. These sandals were symbolic, she explains. A message. If someone in the royal family betrayed the throne, they might be buried with stone sandals to keep their soul from walking forward. You feel that one deep in your chest. So sandals were freedom or chains. There's one pair here that's especially chilling. Black obsidian soles with spikes on the inside. Meant to cause pain with every step. The person buried with them? A cousin of a queen, accused of treason. Whether the charges were true or just politics, we'll never know. The sandals remain as testimony. You step back, the silence heavier now. But just as it's about to tip into darkness, your guide leads you back into the main chamber and toward one final display. A circle of sandals, arranged in a spiral on the floor. These, she says, belonged to one queen. One journey. From the center to the outer ring, the sandals change, thicker to thinner, dark to light, heavy to feathered. A visual story. The queen's life. Her walk. Her becoming. And in the very center, the final pair. No soles. Just straps made of windblown reed and gold thread. Not meant to touch ground. Only sky. You sit with that for a long moment. And maybe you start to feel it now, the theme pulling tight through all of this. That even when a queen was still, even when she died, her walk continued. And the sandals. They were never just shoes. They were spells. Steps turned into prayer. Footprints made eternal. You turn now, quietly, toward the next chamber. A softer one. Where childhood sandals still swing from ivory hooks, and history gets adorably tiny. You step into the next chamber and immediately feel your heart soften. The ceiling dips lower, the walls painted not with grand processions or sacred gates, but simple stars, river reeds, and animals mid-stride. A hippo, a hoopoe bird, a startled gazelle. And in the center, tiny sandals. Dozens of them. Some no longer than your palm, others slightly larger, still delicate, still utterly impractical by modern standards. They dangle gently from carved ivory pegs or sit nestled inside linen-lined alcoves, each pair a whisper of a queen's earliest steps. This is the nursery of sandals. Not a nursery as in cribs and lullabies, though the mood here is tender, but a space to honor the beginning of every queen's story. Before the thrones and feasts and flaming gates, there were stubby toes, curious waddles, and sandals that squeaked more than they strutted. You crouch in front of a pair no thicker than a fig leaf. The soles are made of papyrus, woven with dyed goat hair around the edges to create a soft trim. Decorative? Yes. But also practical. A built-in buffer for the queen in training learning how not to fall on her royal face. And here's your mainstream historical fact. In Nubian noble households, a child's first sandals were crafted by hand, not by artisans, but by the queen mother herself, or a trusted female elder. It wasn't about skill. It was about blessing each stitch with protection, patience, and a strong arch. Because what is a queen without sturdy feet? You notice something odd about one pair, they're mismatched. One is palm leaf, the other soft linen. One strap is bright blue, the other a faded green. Were these unfinished? You ask. Your guide smirks. Not at all. These belonged to Queen Dahlia when she was 3. She refused to wear matching anything. A fringe tidbit, and a delightful one. Apparently, young Dahlia insisted on chaos feet, as her nurses called them. She believed her right foot liked to feel crunchy and her left soft. No one dared correct her because she was terrifying, even in diapers. She grew up to be a famously unpredictable ruler. Some say the mismatched sandals were the start of it. You walk farther, noting how the craftsmanship changes. At first, sandals are round and soft-edged, made for crawling and fumbling. Then they become slimmer, more structured, miniature versions of adult styles, but with colorful flourishes and ridiculous embellishments. Like the pair shaped like tiny crocodiles. Or the one with little bells sewn into the straps. Jingle, jingle, here comes future royalty. But this wasn't just playtime. In Nubian culture, children's sandals served a crucial ritual function. At age 5, royal children participated in the first walk ceremony, where they walked a short path from their nursery to the royal garden alone, watched by the court, guided by no one. That path, exactly 33 steps long. The sandals they wore that day were never worn again. Instead, they were sealed in a protective box and placed in the family tomb for safekeeping. You stand now before one of those ceremonial pairs. Gold-threaded straps, little heel wings attached like Hermes, but less Greco, more glittery Nubian sass. Underneath, a phrase is scratched into the leather: "My path begins where others end." Historians still argue whether that was a personal motto or something standardized for all first walk sandals. Either way, it slaps. But these weren't all innocent beginnings. Your guide pauses at a smaller display, darker wood, less ornate. A pair of sandals with thick leather soles and chains instead of straps. These, she says quietly, belonged to Queen Amanishakheto during her exile as a child. Whoa! Back up. Apparently, Amanishakheto's mother was accused of sedition and executed. The young princess was exiled for 6 years to a desert outpost, watched closely but allowed to walk daily in a sand garden. These sandals, designed so she could walk but not run, so she'd remember her limits. But when she returned as an adult, she had those same sandals recast in gold. Not to wear, but to display beside her throne. A statement. A callback. A quiet rebellion. Remember those? She reportedly asked a visiting diplomat. The diplomat left, swiftly. This place is full of echoes like that. Childhood memories encoded in leather and reeds. You pause in front of a display shaped like a spiral, the growth wheel. It showcases one queen's sandal collection over her first 10 years. Each pair more complex than the last, reflecting lessons learned. 1 year, soft sandals with no heel, she broke 2 toes racing a goose. Another, sandals with extra arch support, she climbed too many trees. And 1 heartbreaking year, plain, black mourning sandals, the year her brother died. The foot remembers, doesn't it? Here's something wild. Some Nubian queens kept all their childhood sandals in a private chamber near their quarters. Not for sentimentality, but strategy. They believed that by studying how they walked as children, through joy, rage, mischief, they could return to their truest instincts. One queen reportedly consulted her baby souls before every major decision. "Who was I before they taught me fear?" she once asked. It's hard not to feel that. You reach out, touch the rim of one last display. Inside, a pair of sandals made not for walking, but for floating. They're built onto miniature reed boats, so the wearer's steps left tiny drag marks in the dust, as if sailing instead of striding. They were never meant to last, your guide says. Just to make an entrance. And now, as you leave the nursery behind, you can almost hear it, the shuffle of little feet, the laughter echoing off old walls, the soft slap of sandal against stone. Queens didn't just appear. They waddled. They tripped. They refused matching colors. But every step mattered. And next, you're headed where the politics sharpen. To the room where sandal choices could declare war or prevent one. You don't even need your guide to tell you, you can feel it the moment you cross the threshold. The air tightens. The floor shifts from warm clay to cool polished basalt, carved with intersecting lines like crossroads. You're in the diplomatic walkway now, the chamber where queens chose the sandals that didn't just move them through palace corridors, but across borders, across battlefields, across history. These weren't about comfort. These were weapons. Messages. Statements more cutting than any dagger. At the center of the room, a raised runway of stone stretches out like a ceremonial catwalk. And on either side, rows of sandals with names and dates etched beneath them. You glance down and read. Queen Temisha, Year 3 of the Nile Accord. Queen Zalmetra, Northern March Disarmament Walk. Queen Kiru, Treaty of Reeds, Sunset Path. Your guide catches your eye. Each pair worn once. Each step remembered. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In Nubian diplomacy, a queen's footwear was part of the message. Just as hieroglyphs adorned letters, and scent-accompanied sealed scrolls, so too did sandals serve as communicative devices, coded in their materials, colors, and even the sound they made on stone. Some sandals were designed to squeak. Others to whisper. Some made no sound at all, gliding across polished floors like silence made flesh. That wasn't a flaw in craftsmanship. It was strategy. You walk beside a pair made of obsidian leather, so black they swallow light. Slender silver rings line the soles like lunar phases. These were worn to a funeral negotiation, your guide says. Her brother had been assassinated. She arrived not in mourning robes, but in these sandals. Why, you ask? To say she would not grieve publicly. That diplomacy would not soften her. And it worked. The enemy blinked first. You stop next at a delicate-looking pair, translucent leather laced with tiny beads of amethyst. Ornate. Frivolous, even. They look impractical. They were, your guide nods. That was the point. These belonged to Queen Naomi, sent to broker peace between 2 warring provinces. She arrived at the battlefield barefoot, carrying the sandals in her arms like fragile glass. She slipped them on only when she entered the neutral tent, visibly struggling to walk, stepping gingerly, theatrically, as if afraid they'd crack. Everyone watched her. No one noticed her guards flanking both exits. She left with 2 signed treaties. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some queens had sandal translators, advisors who specialized in crafting footwearable statements. One even published an early sandal grammar, arguing that wide soles meant openness, curled toes meant guarded intent, and a red strap over the arch meant this meeting is performative and I know it. That author, a former dancer named Metope, she claimed the queen's stride was as loud as her words, if you know how to read the rhythm. Now here's a pair that doesn't look like much at all. Plain papyrus soles, no color, no shine. But the date below it is unforgettable. Queen Halima, eve of invasion. It was the night before the Kushite kingdom launched a counterattack on a Roman fort. Halima attended a ceremonial feast with Roman dignitaries. No one expected confrontation. She wore these sandals, modest, forgettable. Then, as the night ended, she stood and deliberately left the sandals behind. She walked barefoot out of the tent and didn't look back. They say the Romans were confused, your guide murmurs. Was it an insult? A religious act? A signal? Historians still argue whether she intended it as a break in diplomacy, a personal ritual of war, or simply a flex. Whatever the truth, the fort fell within a week. You reach a circular dais now, the turning point. Here, 6 pairs of sandals sit in a ring, each one corresponding to a queen who made a drastic reversal in policy, alliance, or doctrine. U-turns, as it were. Like Queen Thetnari, who walked into a treaty meeting wearing sandals shaped like boats, then walked out again before negotiations began. Her message? I'm not staying docked. Or Queen Zaira, who wore metal-soled sandals that sparked loudly on marble as she walked. The echo was so unsettling that opposing envoys kept mishearing her words. She used that confusion to stall for time until reinforcements arrived. Some of this feels absurd, doesn't it? That so much hinged on footwear. But consider this. When everyone wears robes, when speech is formalized, when every gesture is practiced, it's the unspoken things that shout loudest. And what's more unspoken than the rhythm of your walk? You lean in to examine one last pair, a soft mauve leather with thin straps that crisscross halfway up the calf. They're worn, not ceremonial. Scuffed at the edges. Very human. These, your guide smiles. These were for the meetings no one recorded. Wait, what? Oh yes. Not every queen walked into diplomacy with theatrics. Some came quietly, sat close, made no show. Like Queen Mahetra, who met a rival queen in a garden, both disguised as servants. No guards. No audience. Just 2 women in worn sandals, talking over roasted dates and watered beer. No records remain of what they said. But war never came. And so maybe that's the most powerful diplomatic sandal of all, not the loudest, flashiest pair, but the one you wear when no one is looking. The sandal that says, I'm here. I'm real. Let's talk. You step back from the dais, shoes echoing gently behind you. Your guide nods toward the next chamber. You've seen the power plays, she says. Now come see the indulgences. What's next? The sandal closet of excess. You turn the corner expecting another stone chamber, but what you walk into? This is not a chamber. This is a fashion vortex. Welcome to the sandal closet of excess, also known among palace attendants as the footwear folly. Because this, quite plainly, is where reason came to die. Floor to ceiling, it's pure drama. Arching glass columns filled with hundreds, no, thousands of sandals. Hanging pairs spin slowly on silk threads. Velvet-lined drawers pull out with a sigh, revealing sandals dusted in crushed pearls, sandals shaped like lotus blossoms, sandals that look like they belong on runway models, and sandals that might double as minor weapons. The room smells faintly of cedar, saffron, and something sweet, pomegranate oil, maybe. And somewhere in the distance, a harp plays a single, repeating note. Bougie. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many Nubian queens were known for their extravagant personal sandal collections, some rivaling the crown jewels in value. These weren't just accessories, they were displays of wealth, sovereignty, and artistic patronage. To gift a queen a sandal she actually wore was considered the greatest honor short of divine endorsement. You pause at an ornately carved pedestal. Sitting atop it is a sandal that could only be described as too much. The sole is made of polished ebony wood. The strap is crocodile skin, dyed deep indigo. Across the top, a single feather ostrich, glittering with crushed malachite. Hanging from the heel, a golden chain that leads to a tiny bronze bell. You shake your head. This looks like it cost an entire village. Your guide smirks. It did. But the village was happy to do it. The queen paid double market rate, commissioned a new well, and named the style after their river goddess. Of course she did. You drift past more pedestals. One sandal mimics a falcon's talon. Another is shaped like a half-moon and requires a completely different walking gait just to stay upright. One pair seems to have fur on the inside. Leopard, probably. Or something even more problematic. But these aren't just museum pieces, they're time capsules of individual ego, desire, and a little chaos. Take Queen Osibi, for example. Fringe tidbit incoming. She owned a pair of sandals for every hour of the day, that's 24 different pairs, each scented to match her mood at that time. Morning, jasmine and mint. Noon, citrus and cedarwood. Midnight, sandalwood and tears of her enemies, according to one particularly shady attendant's journal. One pair is encased in glass with a warning placard, "Do not touch, active incense technology." You lean close and, sure enough, there's a faint wisp rising from between the straps. Apparently, the incense would ignite with each step she took, leaving behind a perfumed trail wherever she walked. Another display makes you laugh, sandals carved from hardened honeycomb resin. Why? Queen Taria loved bees, your guide says. Too much. Were they functional? They melted. Instantly. The ants loved them. Speaking of barely functional fashion, there's a whole corner titled "What Was She Thinking?", showcasing sandals worn exactly once. Or less. One pair has glass soles. As in, literal blown glass. A short plaque reveals that Queen Meherset wore them to a single banquet, then stood perfectly still for 5 hours. No walking. No blinking. Just vibes. Next to those, a pair lined with tiny sapphires. Each one a gift from a foreign suitor. She turned him down, obviously, but still made a statement by walking across his royal carpet in the gemstone sandals. The crunch was diplomatic. And now, something truly odd, a wall labeled "Forbidden Sandals." Your guide lowers her voice. These were sandals queens were not allowed to wear, but kept anyway. You see why. One pair bears the symbol of a rival dynasty. Another is covered in prayers from a banned religious sect. One is made of fishbone. Real fishbone. It still smells a little briny. The sandals weren't worn in public, but storing them, that was its own quiet act of rebellion. As if to say, I see you. I remember you. But I decide what touches my feet. You walk deeper into the closet of madness, beginning to sense a pattern. Queens collected sandals like other people collected secrets. Some were gifts. Others were spoils of war. A few, you suspect, were bought in a fit of retail therapy after a rough council meeting. See that pair, your guide points. Queen Zalari bought those right after her chief advisor told her she couldn't raise taxes again. What are they made of? Pure gold. With ruby tassels. She wore them once, sat on her throne, and glared at everyone for 3 hours. A moment of silence for whoever cleaned that floor. Here's the scholarly debate of the section. Historians still argue whether Nubian sandal collecting was primarily about fashion, status signaling, or metaphysical intention. Some believe certain sandals were infused with protective charms or designed for spiritual enhancement. Others say the sheer volume proves it was just elite hoarding. Either way, the effect remains the same. This room pulses with personality. At the far end is the most extravagant pair of all. You gasp. They're set into the floor beneath glass, sparklet from above. The soles are meteoric iron. The straps, diamond-threaded linen. The heel bears a carved phoenix, wings wrapping around to touch the ankle. These, your guide whispers, were the coronation sandals of Queen Amanishakheto. They don't even look wearable. They weren't. She was carried to the throne. The sandals walked without her. Wait, what? Turns out, they were placed on a moving dais. As she sat, the sandals moved in front of her, glowing under the ceremony's firelight. She later said, "I walk not with my body, but with my will." Iconic. You stand there a moment longer, soaking in the wild, gorgeous excess of it all. So many queens. So many moods. And all of them immortalized not in statues or scrolls, but in footwear. And now, time to leave the indulgence behind. Because what comes next is the sandals of farewell. You step away from the last sparkle-soaked sandal and cross a final arched threshold. Instantly, the mood shifts. Gone is the golden glow of excess. Here, the walls darken to a velvety charcoal, and the air smells faintly of frankincense and marula oil. The floor beneath you, smoothed sandstone, quiet underfoot, deliberately hushed. You've entered the chamber of farewell. These sandals, they're not worn to banquets, or meetings, or glory-drenched marches through adoring crowds. No, these are the final pairs. The ones a queen selects to say goodbye to people, to power, to life as she knew it. Your guide slows her pace, voice softening. These are the sandals queens wore for endings, abdications, exile, mourning, even death. You walk past a platform holding a single, dusky sandal. It's missing its partner. The plaque reads, Queen Amanishakheto. Sandal worn to the burial of her co-ruler. It's made of matte flax linen and stitched with tiny black stones, obsidian, you think. The sole is partially scorched, as if it once stepped too close to fire. She walked across the cremation platform barefoot, your guide says, then slid this one on for the return march, symbolizing her shift from shared rule to solitary. You swallow. Harder than expected, this room. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In Kushite and Nubian royal tradition, queens often marked major transitions with a ritualized change in footwear, and in some cases, their last public act was a symbolic walk in designated farewell sandals. Sometimes they were made from humble materials, reeds, papyrus, or discarded textile scraps. Other times, they were painfully beautiful velvets dyed with mourning ink, or suede laced with salt crystal beads to represent tears. The design didn't matter as much as the message, I walk now towards something unknown. You pause at a pair so plain, they'd vanish in any other room. Worn-out soles. Faded leather. The straps are nearly threadbare. The Queen Amanishakheto. The reason this pair matters? She wore them not to leave, but to return. She stepped down from power after a bitter rebellion. Fled to the countryside with nothing. No crown. No servants. Just these sandals. Years later, the rebellion collapsed. They begged her to return. She did. Same sandals. Same pace. According to oral tradition, her first words were, "I never left. You just couldn't see me walking." And now a fringe tidbit: some farewell sandals were deliberately buried not with their queens, but in symbolic graves of their own. Yes. A royal shoemaker or priestess would take the pair and bury it beside an ancient sycamore or at the mouth of a river, as if to let the queen's journey continue through the land itself. One pair here is stored not in a case but in a carved wooden box, closed and sealed with wax. You don't ask to open it. Somehow, it feels like it would scream if you did. Queen Amanishakheto, your guide, whispers. She asked that her farewell sandals be unseen forever. They say she wrote a poem and tucked it inside. Historians still argue whether that poem was a love letter, a curse, or a confession. No one's ever broken the seal. A hush settles around you both. Then your guide walks toward the final display, and you follow without a word. It's different from the others. A low altar, carved with wave patterns. Atop it rests a pair of sandals that don't even look like shoes at first glance. Just two flat slabs of river stone, wrapped in white cotton bands. No heel. No sole. These, she says, were for a queen who chose not to be buried at all. Queen Hasara. She requested that her body be set afloat in the Nile. Not mummified. Not preserved. Just returned to the river that raised her. The sandals were tied to her feet before her final journey. Flat stones, bound to keep her body face up. No one knows where she rests now. But some say fishermen still catch glimpses of fabric on the current when the moon's just right. You exhale slowly. Because it's not just the sandals that hit you, it's the silence of them. The finality. You realize that every queen who walked in here had a last step. A final sandal. A moment when the weight of the crown gave way to something deeper, release. One final joke, whispered between walls that remember. Funny, isn't it? You spend your life picking sandals for the walk. But no one tells you about the last pair. You smile faintly. And so does your guide. You reach the end of the chamber, where two sets of footprints are carved into the stone. One faces inward. The other out. You step into the outward ones. The moment your souls align, the chamber dims further. The floor cools. And now comes the soft close of the journey. The winding down of dusty halls, flickering torchlight, whispered legacies, and 1,000 souls that have walked before yours. Let your mind slow now. Let it step away from the ceremonial paths and jeweled platforms, the political stages and incense-slicked corridors. Instead, picture yourself back at the edge of the Nile, under that same crescent moon the queens knew. There's no throne in sight. No advisors. No feathered headpieces or gold-threaded veils. Only you. Barefoot. On wet earth. Maybe your feet are tired. Maybe they've carried too much. But they've also danced. Run. Paused. Leapt. They've chosen their own paths even if no one noticed at the time. And now, you get to rest. No need for sandals here. Just the hush of reeds. The lull of water. The soft drift of dreams. Still standing there, your bare feet in those carved footprints, you feel the walls gently begin to release you. The chamber behind you fades to shadow, and what lies ahead is not another room, not another choice, but the outside. You step forward. And the past exhales behind you. A breeze greets you. Dry and warm, scented with acacia blossoms and worn stone. The hallway opens into a quiet courtyard. Moonlight spills like silver over the tiled floor. In the center, a low stone platform holds a final exhibit, not of sandals, but of the tools used to make them. A curved knife. A wooden stretcher. Dyed threads still wrapped around an old bobbin. A tiny pot of pigment labeled simply, Queen's Red. This isn't about endings now. This is about what gets left behind for others to begin again. Your guide speaks one last time, almost too quietly to hear. Every queen left her footprint, but it was the makers who carved the path. Mainstream historical fact time: Nubian royal sandals weren't just handcrafted, they were sacredly commissioned. Artisans trained for years in the exact proportions of royal feet. Some were said to be able to sculpt an entire sandal based on a single footstep in sand. In fact, queens often kept a foot scroll, a papyrus or leather roll imprinted with the shape and measurements of their feet. These were given to favored sandal makers, stored in fireproof tubes, and updated yearly. But here's your fringe tidbit: one such scroll was found to include more than just feet. Alongside the measurements, Queen Temaris apparently doodled tiny hieroglyphs of ducks wearing shoes. No one's sure if it was boredom, humor, or a secret sigil. Maybe she just liked ducks. You stroll slowly around the tools, noticing faint initials carved into some. The artisans signed their work discreetly, beneath the heel, inside the straps. Some even wove personal symbols into the thread, visible only under moonlight or when the sandal was soaked in river water. Subtle magic. Hidden pride. One carving stops you cold, a tiny sun symbol, flanked by 2 feet facing away from it. Your guide sees you staring. That one was called the Souls of Defiance. You raise an eyebrow. Legend says the artisan wove them for Queen Ashera after she refused to marry a foreign king. She wore those sandals while marching across the border to personally inform him. OOF. Iconic. You imagine her walking across dry plains, sunlight hammering the ground, sandals whispering rebellion with every step. And here's our last scholarly debate of the night. Historians still argue whether the artisans of Nubia were mere royal servants or spiritual collaborators. Some believe they acted as intermediaries between queens and gods, imbuing the sandals with protective spells, symbols of guidance, and charms of fertility, victory, or peace. Others say, nah, they were just really, really good cobblers. But standing here, gazing at a table once used to build the very things that bore queens into history, it's hard to believe these hands didn't shape more than leather. You begin to notice footprints carved into the courtyard floor. Not decorative. Real impressions. From queens, advisors, attendants, even children. Each set different. Some short-strided, some strong-heeled. One set skips. They weave across the courtyard like music, threading in and out, pausing beneath the pomegranate tree, circling the bench by the water basin. Some end at the platform. Some double back. A few vanish altogether. This was never a museum. Not really. This was a home. You sit on the edge of the platform and let your legs dangle. Your guide says nothing. She knows. You're walking back now, mentally retracing every step. The crocodile dung sunscreen, yes, still gross. The sandal registry with that passive-aggressive scribe. The politics, the rituals, the spa days, the feathers, the meteoric iron soles. All of it. And one strange, beautiful truth rises to the surface. Choosing sandals, for a Nubian queen, was never just about looking good. It was about how you walked. When you walked. Why? And most of all, who was watching? Not the crowd. Not the priests. But you. Because if you knew, really knew, that every step left a mark, wouldn't you make each one count? Wouldn't you pick sandals like they were the last thing keeping you tethered to the earth? Maybe that's the real secret. Maybe all of history is just a long, dusty trail of footprints leading home. So now, it's time to let your mind drift gently back from moonlit courtyards and sandal-lined halls. Let the imagery fade like distant drumbeats over desert dunes, soft, slow, almost imagined. You've walked a long way tonight. Through temples and throne rooms, along scented riverbanks, past the golden echoes of queens who knew exactly what it meant to move with intention. You've tried on sandals of silk and stone, of gold and grief. You've felt the pulse of ritual under your heel, and maybe, just maybe, you've left your own quiet imprint somewhere in the dust behind. So as you settle deeper into your pillows, your breath softening to match the rhythm of ancient footsteps, give yourself permission to be still. No more choosing. No more walking. Just floating, now like Queen Hasara on her silent raft down the Nile. The stars above mirrored in the water below. The wind a whisper. The current a lullaby. Tomorrow, there will be more roads. More choices. Maybe even more shoes to try on. But tonight, you wear nothing but rest. Let your feet relax. Let your thoughts unwind like worn leather strips, loosening from around your ankles. You are safe. You are still. And you are enough. Sweet dreams, my friend.